This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders.
2024, Ireland secured back-to-back Six Nations trophies, the Blues won their first full-blown Super Rugby title in over 20 years, Glasgow snuck the URC, and Antoine Dupont did this. However, in between Toto's two trophies, this was a year in which some rugby was played by some people, and in order to mark the best of that rugby, it's finally time for this. The Squidge Rugby Team of the Year 2024. This is the 7th annual Squidge Team of the Year, and the rules haven't changed. This isn't a World 15 or a list of the best players in each position worldwide, but rather a list of players who have had the best year. Men and women whose 2024 deserve, required, celebrating the most. Players who conjured something up in us, the rugby public, or whose achievements hit brand new heights, and we just have to talk about, have to recognise. This is the team for vibes, not technicality. And whilst it's weighted heavier towards Test rugby, that's not all that counts. The bigger the player's accomplishments, the greater it factors towards the final decision. It's a mixed-gender team, it always has been, deal with it, and the only change we're doing this year is instead of spooling them out over a week in 6 blocks of 2 or 3 at a time, we're just doing it in 2 hits. The backs and then the forwards. But before we get into the wee nippy boys of 2024, it's worth acknowledging the figure without whom there would be no need for a team, the Squidge Rugby Referee of the Year. The last few years have been pretty costly for rugby's officiating stocks. Wayne Barnes, the best referee of the professional era, retired last year, but the 4 years prior had seen us lose the likes of Jerome Garces, Romain Poit and Nigel Owens, all bowing out, leaving the game requiring more of the bulk standard stocks to step up. And as such, I do want to give a runners-up nod to Matt Carley, who got a lot of negative press early in his career, but has become a frankly exceptional referee over the last few years. But the 2024 Referee of the Year is, for me, a guy almost even more familiar with bad press, especially over the last 2 years, yet over this year has taken over the mantle left by Barnes. That is New Zealand's Ben O'Keefe. Kiefer Ben is simply the best communicator of any referee out there these days. England v Australia at Twickenham might have been the best officiated match of the year, largely because of the line O'Keefe was able to walk between coaching and punishing players. Watch him closely and he's always talking, always communicating, always making it incredibly clear what he wants from every player on the field. Eyes everywhere, yet speaking constantly, and has also become maybe the most consistent referee in the game. If O'Keefe gives a controversial decision against a team, more than any other ref in the world, it is solely always on the player, as his knack for explaining exactly what he wants, warning players first before he gives penalties, and remaining consistent is utterly first rate and made him our very deserving Referee of the Year. But you know what Ben O'Keefe wanted even more than that award? A brand new, shiny website. And so he headed to Squarespace. A big fan of consistency, he was able to use Squarespace's centralized features to easily keep his entire website to consistent color schemes, themings, everything using the same fonts, simple looks, even using the new AI features to produce sample copy to be rewritten himself in a voice that suited his own style of his own choosing. All of this wrapped up in one complete package with no need to look anywhere else for anything else at all in building a website, a benokeefe.com if you wanted. And regardless of whether or not you're our Referee of the Year, you yourself can go to Squarespace and grab yourself a shiny new website and a lovely discount by using the offer code Squidge Rugby and the link in the description to get there. Anyway, without further ado, I think it is time to dive into the team itself. The starting 15 with the backs. Last year, just 3 nations made up all 7 backline positions, with France's Gabriel Vernier and Antoine Dupont the only pair to hold on to their places from 2022. So it's time. Let's dive in as we start right at the back with the best fullback of 2024. Most years, the biggest lock in the Squidge Rugby Team of the Year is almost always 6'9", 19 stone Ibenetsabeth in both senses of the word. But this year, that was different. Ellie Kildunn has been the single most exceptional player in the entire world this year. The biggest standout in any corner of the game on the planet Earth. I didn't check Mars, actually. She'd probably be the best fullback on Mars as well. While she's always been a brilliant runner with the ball in hand, Kildunn's pretty publicly stated goal is to be the best rugby player on the planet, male or female. She probably should try and aim for Mars as well. I reckon she'd probably do it. And over the last 12 months, she's ticked off half of that goal with relative ease. The best player in the women's game over 2024, Kildunn has rounded out her game to turn her every rough edge into a strength. Her passing, kicking, distributing game have come on so far that she's now amongst the best 15s in the game at all 3. She's flawless side of the high ball, hits a line with pace and grace, and all of this is done without losing a beat of the counter-attacking majesty she's always had in her locker that always got her into the England team in the first place. This combined with her incredible finishing ability and knack for picking the right lines and finding the opportune spaces at the right time saw her score a pretty staggering 9 tries in the Six Nations, equaling the all-time record male or female. None against France, but at least 2 in every other match. Her hat-trick against Ireland, the icing on the cake. Simply put, Ellie Kildunn has been the best, most dominant player in the sport this year, and is not only a perfect, fitting way to kick off our 2024 Team of the Year, but in addition to the hallowed names of past, David Pocock, Owen Farrell, Antoine Dupont, Eben Etzebeth and Emiliano Buffelli, she is our 2024 Squidge Rugby Player of the Year. 2024 gave us one of rugby's greatest ever puzzles. Cheslin Kolbe scored just 3 tries in 11 games in Japan League 1 this year, and scarcely registers for breaks made, defenders beaten, metres gained, and yet you put that same player on that same form in the green and gold shirt, and he becomes the best winger the game has seen for some time. In many ways, 2024 has been Cheslin's year. Back to the peak of his powers form that made 2019 Cheslin so irresistible, the new Springbok system has seen Kolbe popping up in all sorts of places, playing some unbelievable rugby, breaking the line and creating chances almost at will. Pinning this guy down has become a badge of honour on its own at test level. The electric salad, so unstoppable, just daring and darting through every single tackle, diving and weaving at all moments, making usually world-class defenders look like they've never even heard the phrase cheek to cheek before. I don't know what's going on in Japan, how many men they were committing to Kolbe to prevent him scoring at will every single time he touched the ball, but at test level, facing the finest players on the planet, this year, Cheslin Kolbe was utterly irresistible and almost undefendable. Some players seem destined for greatness, like their entire lives are building up to the moment they take to that pitch and deliver the world-class performance they've been building towards. And some just seem to take it in their stride. Santiago Chocobares has always seemed like a guy who adapts easily. In 2020, a 21-year-old Chocobares was promoted from amateur rugby to the Argentine national team in the space of just 3 months. His test debut 80 minutes in Argentina's first ever win over the All Blacks, and since then it's just gone from strength to strength. His career building and building until seemingly all climaxing in a frankly incredible 2024. For me, Chocobares has become not just the Puma's best player, but the best centre in the world. A guy who can play the game with equal parts physicality and intelligence. His place in this team is as much for his tiny involvements, dummy lines, defensive adjustments, clear communication, slick hands, brilliant sense of timing, and an ability to form a stable and exceptional partnership with anybody he could find off the street. You could walk into Tesco, grab the first person you see, and Santiago Chocobares would be able to make them look like a competent international 13, as much as the more eye-catching moments, playing in sides as aesthetically pleasing as Toulouse and Argentina will no doubt give you if you play in the backs for them. However, the thing about Chocobares that's so outstanding is so often those two things become one and the same. His critical try to put Toulouse into the top 14 final is a sublime read from him before having the pace to follow up. And then after a deadlocked 80, it was his brilliant, subtle, faded line followed by a glorious and perfectly timed touch that opened up Leinster for the first try of the Champions Cup final, all the way in extra time in the highest caliber, most intense game I saw all year. And then there's this. We've discussed it at length in our video on the game, but the way Chocobares baits Leonard Brown into one read and explodes onto the ball is world class before linking up with centre partner Sinti, who thankfully was not just a guy from Tesco, so can run it in to score. In his now second win against the All Blacks is phenomenal. Chocobares is one of those players you sometimes don't appreciate first time round, but every time I go back and watch him, I tend to realise he was the best player on the pitch. He's put in a near flawless 9 out of 10 performance in every single match played. He might have missed the autumn with an injury, but his absence was largely felt by Argentina, whose defence suddenly softened out wide. In 2 teams who won big this year, Chocobares has been exceptional. One of the best players on the pitch in the Champions Cup final, the best in their wins over the All Blacks and Springboks for me, and a critical part of adding consistency to both sides beyond their big moments. Defensively, he's up there with the best centres in the world. Offensively, he's got a pretty complete skill set, and when it comes to tiny selfless moments and superb technical play, there's nobody better than the Puma King himself, slotted right in the centre. Tommaso Menoncello has had quite the year. Still living at home with his parents to this day, this year the young Italian centre had to cram his Six Nations Player of the Tournament trophy into his childhood closet because he'd run out of space to display his amazing achievements around his room. Where Santiago Chocobaras has built a near perfect all-round game without gaps in skills, Menoncello has gone down a different path. A pretty great player coming into this year. Over 2024, the Benetton boy has gone up gears, not by improving his weaknesses, but by building his strengths to a world-beating standard. And best of all, those strengths aren't standard centre stuff. Tommaso Menoncello instead is a back who gives you impact. If it goes boom, Menoncello can probably do it. In contact, he is beyond explosive, as dominant a carry as you see anywhere in Test rugby, but without being the size of a Diolande or a Karevi. The way he stays on his feet and rides through contact is always exceptional, and he allows himself to use his offloading game and superb hands so much more easily for the way he stays upright in the tackle. The kid is also lightning quick, showcasing countless tries for Benetton and his brilliant finish after a superb performance against New Zealand. And defensively, boy brings the boom far, both in the tackle, but perhaps more impressively, the turnover, winning 3 against the All Blacks alone. Italy had their best ever Six Nations in 2024, whilst Benetton upset the odds to finish in the top 8 at the URC, and Menoncello was the star of both campaigns. Alongside Ange Capeluzzo and Paolo Garbisi, after years of sloggers and workhorses, Italy finally has a major superstar to call their own. Tommaso Menoncello is the future of the game in Italy, but this year, and in this team, he's very much been present. Put simply, Abby Dow can do things nobody else in the world can. Be it a sidestep, a try-saving tackle, or a miraculous Twitter pun, Dow is one of rugby's most endearing and overwhelming forces of nature. The sort of winger who can turn an inch of space into an acre and a centimetre into 7 points. And 2024 has been another utterly vintage year for Dow heads everywhere, of which I would consider myself one. For club and country this year, Abby Dow has played 18 games between December 1st, 2023 and December 1st, 2024. She has scored at least one try in 17 of those 18, only falling short in her club Ealing's 26-7 loss to Bristol earlier this year. In fact, if you want to go back to the last time she went a game without scoring before that, you'd need to rewind almost 2 years to another game against Bristol in March 2023. Her record is unbelievable. 9 tries for England, the leading scorer in the PWR 2023-24 with 12, despite Ealing finishing bottom half of the table, and back on the score sheet the moment she returned from national duty for the new season as well. For context, right? Dow has scored the same number of tries in just 2024 as Cheslin Colby did in 24, 23 and 22 combined. And we're not talking simple dot downs here either. This effort against New Zealand in particular would be hard to believe if we weren't just also used to seeing her do stuff like this. Her hat-trick against Ireland packed with just as many gasp-worthy moments. She's a player that produces magic, where every single touch feels like a try-scoring opportunity, no matter how many are packed around her. She's maybe my favourite player in the world to watch. Just an utterly electric, brilliant winger. A concussion kept her at the finale of the W15, but by then she'd already proven her point. Abby Dow is World Rugby's most lethal finisher, most breathtaking runner, and just outright one of the finest players on the planet. You'd be surprised how genuinely rare it is for a player to really, truly live up to the hype. People first started building up Marcus Smith in around 2016 when he represented Harlequins at the Premiership Sevens just months after his 70th birthday. At age 18, after just 4 games of pro rugby, Eddie Jones called him up into the England squad. It was another 3 years before he'd win his first cap, but from there things only intensified. His first Six Nations as a regular starter in the 10 jersey, Smith Mania truly hit. Hyped to a degree I've legitimately never seen another player hit in the UK. The sole focus of every broadcast was this young kid, this superstar in waiting, Mr. Smith, with knives sharpened the entire time to tear him right down in every single second where he wasn't hitting the heights the media had built for him. The Marcus Smith of 2024 is a different player to a few years ago, a more composed, complete, much better player. When he first brought him in, right back in 2017, Eddie Jones infamously said, "Talent will get you into the squad, but hard work and desire will get you into the team." And it's exactly that mantra that's made Smith the first name on the Rose Centre team sheet this year, possibly the form player on the planet this autumn. The Marcus Smith of the last 12 months has managed to combine his utterly electric, brilliant burst, the sort of thing he's always been able to bring on attack, with some of the best game management you'll see anywhere. Smith is now now one of those incredibly rare players who seems to always make the right decision. A Carter, a Dupont, a Ford, a Barrett. If you ever, watching on TV, see something with the benefit of endless angles and slow motion and whatever, and think this is clearly the right option, and Smith does something different, it's almost always going to be something better than whatever you had in mind. Whether it's stuff like this, catching the Springboks off guard with a dummy drop goal to create a brilliant try for slight home, this superb interception against New Zealand for Faye Boso to score just next to the posts, cross kicks like this for IFW to score once again, his fantastic try against France and then later against Japan, or this more general game management from 50-22s to just smart hung kicks, knowing exactly when to stay out of it. And that's before we've mentioned what he's been doing for Quins, guiding them to their best ever European finish in a miracle campaign where no opposition ever felt safe. No team too big to fall to the mighty quartered sword. 9 tries amongst the highlights of his year at the Stoop. His growth as a player highlighted as much by games like this against Cardiff as those against New Zealand and South Africa. In a match they should win, but up against a team chaotically motivated, on top early, and seemingly on fire in the first half, Smith shut the game down, managed it beautifully before lighting it back up. That consistency and intelligence now all over his game as he went on to put 50 points on them, taking the Battenberg gang clear. This has been the best year of Marcus Smith's career, but I think it's pretty important to say right now, this is just so far. I mean, it kind of has to be, doesn't it? Antoine Dupont has come to feel like rugby's main character. A Tom Cruise type leading man who can do anything. Comedy, drama, tragedy, with either the most brilliant technical performance or fist-pumping, heart-pounding glee imaginable. Perhaps this ubiquity is why so many South Africans seem to take against the guy, but the truth is, even when he decides to take 12 months off Test rugby for himself, the game still feels all about him. Dipping in and out of the Toulouse team whilst gallivanting around the globe, Dupont this year did something we all thought impossible and got even better. Fitter and quicker for a start, but over the last year, Dupont has added jackling, line-out throws, exceptional fly half play, and so much more to his already at bursting point game. Because the thing is, whilst there have been a very small number of players with an equivalent level of talent to our Antoine, I don't think anybody has ever played the game with more beauty and joy. Each and every touch feels like a gift, a joy, a wonder. His performances for Toulouse and the back end of the European season were legitimate tell your grandkids stuff. 6 tries in as many games, 4 of them being in the knockouts, and that's before you get into the game where he didn't score. Antoine Dupont's performance in the 2024 Champions Cup final might be, and I recognise this can sound like hyperbole, the best I've ever seen from a rugby player. It's something I've thought about once a week since it happened. I deliberately left that hyperbolic sentiment out of the video we made on it at the time because I didn't want it to go overboard. I didn't even dare myself to think it at the time, but each time I watch that match back, and I watch it back quite a few times, it's now one of my favourite games ever played, I sit genuinely gawk at what he managed to do. This chase back on what looks to be a clear try, only to then get over it, stop it, and make the turnover himself. Then there's this turnover, just as Leinster gaining momentum. The clearances for 60 metres off both feet. This incredible chase and offload to almost create a try. This 50-22 with the best positional backfield player in the world lined up perfectly to his side. Initially going to kick off one foot, then he switches and hits it off the other. Flawlessly. Antoine Dupont in that game was Toulouse's top carrier. He was the best on the pitch for defenders beaten, offloads made second for clean breaks and passes, and quite unbelievably, from a scrum-half, were not just more turnovers than anybody else on the pitch, but more than Leinster's own entire starting pack put together. And then we have the other final he played 3 weeks later, where Dupont was unplayable in a different way, absolutely on fire with the ball in hand, a second successive championship match, player of the match in a month or so, 2 tries bagged and about 800 assists and try involvements. If you drop Dupont on either of these days into the Leinster or Bordeaux team, they'd have won. And indeed, he proved all that above the odds at the Olympic Sevens. France before Antoine were no-hopers, an empty team who didn't even qualify for the previous Olympics and hadn't won a single tournament since 2005. They didn't have a dream, a hope of the Olympic medal. And then into Antoine. France now stand as the reigning World Series and Olympic gold medalists. Dupont's influence enormous. His performance in the gold medal match won for the absolute ages. Subbed on at half-time, he proceeded to do this with his first touch and dominate a Fiji team who'd never lost an Olympic match like it was nothing. This was one of rugby's greatest ever sights from one of rugby's greatest ever players, and a team of players whose year deserves celebrating the most, who made us feel the most over 2024. There can be nobody but Antoine. Okay, honourable mentions time. Honourable mentions. And we're going to probably speedrun this so it doesn't take at least half an hour. But there's so many guys that deserve shout out. Starting in the back three. Louis B.L. Barry's form in the second half of the year probably would have netted in the shirt just about over the brilliant James Lowe and the ever exceptional Will Jordan if it was an all-male team, with Team of the Year staple Bowden Barrett or France's maverick beauty Tomo Ramos likely slotting in at fullback, whilst if it was an all-female team, Black Fur Morangi Paul or Caitlin Vianacolo and Canadians Paige Farris and Fancy Bermudez stand as the likely frontrunners, though Joanna Grise was brilliant for France, Alicia Diinka, Corinne Grant, Jess Breach, and Claudia Pena were phenomenal. And sticking to Spaniards, Pena's male counterpart, Matiano Cian, had a brilliant year, nailing himself down as one of the most exciting players in the world heading into World Cup qualification year. Juan Cruz Maria was a sensation for Argentina and Toulouse. Cam Winnett, one of the few worst players to leave the year for reputation enhanced. Apple Farsi has been brilliant. Emmanuel Faye-Weboso possibly could have even slotted into the starting team as well, whilst Mark Talea and Tom Wright provide their usual standards of bullshit across the whole year, as did the entire Scotland back three. Duan van der Merwe, Darcy Graham, and Blair King Horn Blair Mann. Lieutenant George Furbank was also so good for England. And to pop back to Tier 2 land for a moment, George's Akatabasata and David Ignashvili both deserve mentions, as do Marius Simonescu for Romania, Portugal's Raffaele Shorty, Belgium's Thomas Walraff, Hong Kong icon Matt Worley, and then two of the year's greatest breakthrough players, metronomic Brazil fullback Lucas Tranquez and the star man in Zimbabwe's unbeaten year, the electric, incredible Edward Sagake, who we did briefly talk about putting in starting team, mostly because it would be the most on-brand thing we could possibly do. Centers. Previous inclusions, Bundy Oki, Gabriel Vernier, Gail Fickew, and Hugh Jones were all excellent. Meg Jones excelled on recall for England. Sylvia Brunt and Amy Duplessis were so good for the Black Ferns, as were a bunch of regular big hitters. Jessie Creel, Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringrose, Geordie Barrett, Georgia Fredericks, while Emma Orr, Eve Higgins, and Alf Kelter all really shone for their respective nations, as did Belgium captain Jans Torf and Hong Kong's Ben Axton Barrett, the best Barrett. Len Ikitau was exceptional, and then two out-of-nowhere mentions for two undeniable guys on brilliant form. Juan Ignacio Brex and Japan's Dylan Riley, who's become a brilliant game breaker over the last year. However, there are three names most unlucky, hugely unlucky, not to be in here. Damien Diolande showed some of the best form of his career this year, just rounding out all the rough areas in his game and becoming just an undeniable force for the box. Sione Tuipulotu, who should really be in the team, and I can't justify where he isn't, and Alex Tessier, the critical cog in Canada's remarkable 2024, likely partners Meg Jones probably in an all-female 15, but she will be nailed on. Fly halves, Crack Jowley and Ollie Aitchison had great years conducting extremely efficient orchestras for Ireland and the Red Roses. Roman Unterak missed all of the year's Test rugby, but was just spellbinding for Toulouse. Hinkley Valvassa, his silky self for Romania, and a few regulars were also brilliant. Andre Pollard, Caleb Muntz, and Finn Russell, all at the top of their game, as was Thomas Albanos, who really established himself as a Test player this year, while Noel Olaseo overcame all doubters to finally click at Test level. The special mention has to go to Sasha Feinberg Ngome Zulu, who looked on track to sew up this shirt for himself, only to pull up injured halfway through the year. His breakthrough over 2024 was spellbinding, transformational. Seeing him in the Springbok team reminded me when Aaron Smith first displaced Piri Whippu for the All Blacks, a team who already seemed near perfect, somehow getting even better for the inclusion of this brilliant youngster. And last but not least, the boys and girls fighting for Antoine's jersey. Jameson Gibson Park was probably the best nine in pure Test rugby this year, with Cam Roygard snapping at his heels, though on pure ability, Cast and Uruguay's Santiago Arata once again might overtake them all, but mention also has to go to his countryman Santiago Alvarez, who slotted in so effortlessly. When you watch Uruguay, you just thought Arata was playing. Alex Mitchell spent a bunch of it on the sidelines, but has become one of the best nines in the world for England and Northampton. Portugal's Hugo Camacho is such a box of tricks. He's brilliant to watch. I love watching him. He's so good in the Rugby Up Championship. Martin Pajrello had a quietly excellent year for Italy. Mo Hunt was excellent as ever. Olivia Rapp sublime again for Canada, as was Sophia Stefan for Italy. But in a purely female team, the shirt remains French, in the comfortable hands once again of Pauline Bourdon-Saint-Sus, whilst there is one other shirt to give out. This team doesn't have a bench, but if it did, on it would go the best number 21 in the world, Tate McDermott, a guy uniquely able to transform a game in his team's favour in those later stages.
Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. That is part one of the Team of the Year for 2024. It comes around quicker every year. We've split it just being two videos, just the forwards and backs this year instead of being the individual groups of edition. So the one with the forwards will be with you in a couple of days' time. Yeah, so it's all those people who work hard doing all the bloody scrums and the lineouts and all of the hard work around the park and stuff. So we're going to look at those. There's a load of them that do get in the team, a load of honourable mentions who don't, as you've just seen. So again. Many back rowers. Yeah, there's just so many of those play well every year. Yeah. If you're a back rower, stop playing well. As well as the Coach of the Year, which I believe everyone is always totally normal about. So that is coming up in a couple of days' time. Please let us know what you think of the team, and also like who do you think is going to be in the team. I think we're going to pick Nick Tompkins in at least 7 of the 8 forward positions.
If anyone gets it correct that Nick Tompkins is playing 7, then
We'll send them a Macavinapola.
we'll send him back in a bowler.
Just the real guy.
I said, well, it's the Wallabies against the All Blacks. He said, it's a bit of an issue, isn't it?